Quinton Hayes couldn't believe what he was seeing on the monitor. Third floor, toy store, after closing hours. And there, right in the center of the camera angle, a small girl was being forcibly dragged by a man. Quinton's pulse quickened, his old FBI training kicking in. 18 years in the child abduction unit, 150 cases solved, dozens of children reunited with their families. Then that accident happened. He lost his partner and was forced to retire. Now he was 54 years old, a simple security guard with no weapon. But the fear in that child's eyes changed everything. He reached for his radio but stopped. If he called the police, the abductors would hear the alarm and disappear with the child. He had to run this operation alone, and he only had minutes. Quinton Hayes had been working the night shift at Riverside Mall in Charlotte, North Carolina for 3 years. Most people who knew him saw a quiet, methodical security guard who took his job seriously but never caused trouble. He was the guy who helped elderly shoppers find their cars, who gave directions to confused tourists, who made sure teenagers didn't skateboard in the parking garage. What nobody knew was that before becoming a mall security guard, Quinton Hayes had been one of the FBI's most decorated agents in the child abduction and serial murder unit. For 18 years, he'd tracked down some of the most dangerous predators in the country, bringing home children who'd been taken from playgrounds, schools, and even their own bedrooms. He'd been good at his job, exceptionally good. His clearance rate was 93%, far above the national average. He had a gift for reading people, for spotting the tiny behavioral tells that separated worried parents from guilty ones, for understanding the twisted psychology of those who hurt children. But that all ended on a rainy November night in 2019. Quinton and his partner of 12 years, Agent Rebecca Chun, had been closing in on a suspect in rural Virginia. The man had taken a 7-year-old boy from a gas station parking lot. They had tracked him to an abandoned farmhouse, called for backup, but decided they couldn't wait. Every minute counted in these cases. They'd gone in together, just like they'd done dozens of times before. But this time was different. The suspect had been waiting, armed and desperate. In the chaos that followed, Rebecca had taken 2 bullets to the chest. She died in Quinton's arms before the ambulance arrived. The boy had survived. They'd found him locked in a basement room, scared but physically unharmed. The suspect was killed in the shootout. By all official accounts, it was a successful operation. But Quinton knew the truth. His impatience, his need to be the hero, had cost Rebecca her life. He'd been cleared of any wrongdoing by the internal investigation, but the guilt had been crushing. 3 months later, at age 51, Quinton Hayes had turned in his badge and gun, taken early retirement, and disappeared from the FBI. For 6 months, he'd done nothing but sit in his small apartment, replaying that night over and over. His ex-wife had tried to reach out, but he'd pushed her away. His adult daughter Jasmine had called every week, worried about him, but he'd kept the conversations brief. Then one day, he'd seen a news report about a missing child in Charlotte. The parents were begging for information, showing pictures of their smiling daughter. Quinton had watched their pain, and something inside him had shifted. He couldn't bring Rebecca back. He couldn't undo that night, but he could still help find missing children. That's when he'd applied for the security guard position at Riverside Mall. It wasn't glamorous work, but it put him in a place where thousands of people passed through every day, including, occasionally, the kind of people he used to hunt. Over the past 3 years, Quinton had quietly intervened in 4 potential abduction situations. A man trying to lure a child away from her mother with promises of puppies. A teenager being followed by someone much older. A woman who'd taken her ex-husband's child in violation of a custody agreement. Each time, Quinton had handled it discreetly, calling the right authorities, gathering evidence, never revealing his FBI background. But tonight was different. It was Thursday, November 14th, 11:47 p.m. Riverside Mall had closed at 9. The last customers had left by 9:30. The cleaning crew had finished their rounds by 11. Quinton was alone in the security office on the first floor, doing his final camera sweep before starting his walking rounds. That's when he saw them on camera 3C, third floor, near Toyland Express. A man, approximately 6 feet tall, wearing a dark jacket and baseball cap, pulled low. And beside him, being pulled along by her wrist, was a small girl. She looked about 7 or 8 years old, with dark curly hair and wearing pink pajamas. Pink pajamas, Quinton's blood ran cold. Children didn't come to the mall in their pajamas. Children weren't at the mall at midnight. He leaned closer to the monitor, his trained eye taking in every detail. The man's body language was wrong, tense, constantly looking around, his grip on the child too tight. The girl's face was tear-streaked, her mouth open like she'd been crying but had given up making sound. This was an abduction in progress. Quinton's hand moved instinctively to his hip, but there was no service weapon there anymore. Just a radio and a flashlight. His mind raced through options. Option 1, call 911. But that would take at least 5 to 10 minutes for police to arrive. By then, the suspect could have the child out of the building and gone. The mall had multiple exits, and Quinton couldn't cover them all. Option 2, use the radio to call his supervisor, Dennis Murphy. But Dennis was 62 years old, overweight, and had never handled anything more serious than shoplifting. He'd probably just call 911 anyway, wasting precious time. Option 3, handle it himself. Quinton knew what the regulations said. Security guards were supposed to observe and report, not intervene in serious crimes. He could lose his job. He could face legal liability. Without FBI authority, he was just a civilian who could be charged with assault if things went wrong. But he'd spent 18 years of his life finding children. He'd seen what happened to them when rescuers arrived too late. He'd comforted parents who would never see their children alive again. He couldn't let that happen. Not when he was right here, right now, with a chance to stop it. Quinton grabbed his radio and switched it to an unused channel. He didn't want anyone monitoring the main frequency to hear what he was about to do. He tucked his flashlight into his belt and headed for the stairwell. His knees weren't what they used to be. Age and old injuries made climbing stairs harder than it once was. But his mind was sharp, calculating distances, predicting movements, planning his approach. As he climbed, he pulled out his personal cell phone and opened a recording app. If he was going to do this, he needed evidence. He started recording audio, stating the date, time, and what he'd observed. At minimum, if something went wrong, investigators would have his account. Reaching the 3rd floor, Quinton pushed open the stairwell door carefully, keeping it from making noise. The floor was dark except for emergency lighting. The stores were all shuttered with metal gates. He could hear them now, footsteps, and a small voice whimpering. Quinton moved along the wall, staying in shadows. His FBI training came back like muscle memory. How to move silently, how to use angles and cover, how to approach a suspect without being detected. Then he saw them, about 30 yards ahead. The man had stopped in front of the employee elevator, the one that led to the loading dock in the basement. He was fumbling with something in his pocket, probably keys. Mall employees weren't supposed to have those keys, which meant this was planned, prepared. The girl was slumped against the wall, not fighting anymore. That worried Quinton more than if she'd been screaming. It meant she was shutting down, going into shock. Quinton had to make his move now, before they got to that elevator. He stepped out from the shadows. "Excuse me, sir. Mall's closed." The man spun around, and Quinton saw his face clearly for the first time. Mid-30s, pale, with the kind of nervous energy that came from either drugs or desperation. His hand tightened on the girl's wrist, and she whimpered. "I work here," the man said quickly. Just closing up my store." "Which store is that?" Quinton asked calmly, walking slowly closer. His eyes were on the man's hands, watching for weapons. GameStop. I manage GameStop." "GameStop is on the 2nd floor," Quinton said. "And they closed 3 hours ago." The man's eyes darted left and right, looking for an escape route. "Look, man, I don't want any trouble. This is my daughter. We were just—" "What's your daughter's name?" Quinton interrupted, his voice still calm but firm. The man hesitated. "Sarah." Quinton looked at the little girl. "Is that true, sweetheart? Is this your daddy?" The girl's eyes met Quinton's, and in that moment, he saw everything he needed to know. Terror, a desperate plea for help, and a tiny shake of her head, so small the man didn't notice, but Quinton caught it. "See? She's fine. We're leaving now." The man turned back to the elevator, pulling the girl harder. That's when Quinton moved. 18 years of FBI defensive tactics training might have been a decade old, but his body remembered. He closed the distance in 3 quick steps, his hand shooting out to grab the man's wrist, the one holding the girl. "Let her go," Quinton said, his voice dropping to the tone he'd used countless times in interrogation rooms. The tone that said he was not asking. The man tried to pull away, but Quinton's grip was iron. "Let go of me. You can't touch me. I'll sue you. Release the child. Now." The man made his mistake then. He tried to punch Quinton with his free hand. Quinton had been expecting it. He ducked under the wild swing, used his leverage to twist the man's arm, and suddenly the man was face first against the wall, his arm pinned behind his back in a control hold. The girl stumbled away, free. "Don't move," Quinton commanded. With his free hand, he pulled out his radio. "This is Hayes to all units. Code 10 to 31 in progress. 3rd floor near employee elevator. Male suspect in custody, child victim safe. I need police response immediately." Within seconds, his radio crackled. It was Dennis, sounding confused and half asleep. "Hayes? What the hell is a code 10 to 31? Quinton kept his knee against the suspect's back, maintaining control. "Dennis, call 911. Tell them we have a child abduction in progress at the mall. Suspect in custody, child is safe, but we need police and paramedics now." There was a pause. "Jesus Christ, Quinton. Are you serious? Do it now, Dennis." Okay. I'm calling." The man under Quinton's control was still struggling. "You're making a huge mistake. This is kidnapping. You're assaulting me." Quinton leaned in closer, his voice low. "I know exactly what you are. I spent 18 years hunting people like you. Trust me, you're not going anywhere." The girl had backed away about 10 feet, watching with wide eyes. Quinton looked at her gently. "Sweetheart, you're safe now. Can you tell me your name?" The girl's voice was barely a whisper. Maya, that's a beautiful name. My name is Quinton. I'm going to make sure you're okay. Can you tell me where you live?" Before Maya could answer, the man tried one more time to break free, bucking violently. Quinton adjusted his hold, using his body weight to keep the man pinned. He wasn't as young as he used to be, and his knees were screaming in protest, but he held firm. "I didn't do anything wrong," the man shouted. "She wanted to come with me. She wanted to see the toys." That's when Quinton heard the sirens in the distance, getting closer. Help was coming. "Maya," Quinton said, keeping his voice calm despite the struggling suspect beneath him. "Do you know this man?" Maya shook her head vigorously. "He took me from my bed. He came through my window." The man went suddenly still. He'd just realized that the child had contradicted his story, and he was caught. 2 minutes later, the mall's main entrance burst open, and 6 police officers rushed in with weapons drawn, following Dennis's directions to the 3rd floor. When they arrived and saw the scene, Quinton calmly holding a suspect while a small girl in pajamas stood nearby, the lead officer immediately understood the situation. "Charlotte PD," the officer announced. "Sir, I'm going to need you to step back from the suspect." Quinton released his hold and stood up slowly, his knees protesting. He raised his hands to show he wasn't a threat. The suspect tried to flee with the child through the employee elevator. The child states she was abducted from her home. As officers moved in to handcuff the suspect, one of them, a younger officer named Rodriguez, approached Maya gently. "Hi, sweetie. You're safe now. Can you tell me your address?" Maya, now sobbing with relief, gave an address in a neighborhood about 4 miles from the mall. Rodriguez immediately radioed it in. "Dispatch, we have a possible 207A origin point." He relayed the address. Within seconds, dispatch confirmed a frantic 911 call had come in about 30 minutes ago from that address. Parents reporting their 7-year-old daughter Maya Johnson missing from her bedroom. The lead officer, Sergeant Michael Thornton, turned to Quinton with newfound respect. "You stopped an active child abduction. That took guts. Just doing what needed to be done," Quinton said quietly. "We're going to need a full statement from you. This is going to be a major case." Quinton nodded. He'd expected that. "I have audio recording of my initial observation and the confrontation. I can provide that as evidence." Thornton's eyebrows rose. "You recorded it? That's unusually professional for a security guard." Quinton met his eyes, but said nothing. Some things didn't need to be explained yet. Within 20 minutes, Maya's parents arrived at the mall, having been brought by police. The reunion was everything Quinton had spent 18 years of his life working toward. A mother and father clutching their child, tears streaming down their faces, thanking God she was alive and safe. Maya's mother, Diana Johnson, approached Quinton with tears in her eyes. Thank you. Thank you so much. If you hadn't been here, if you hadn't stopped him. She's a brave little girl, Quinton said gently. She did everything right. Diana hugged him tightly, and Quinton felt something crack inside his chest, a piece of the wall he'd built around himself since Rebecca's death. As the Johnsons were escorted out by victim services, Sergeant Thornton pulled Quinton aside. I need to ask you something. That control hold you used, that wasn't mall security training. And the way you handled the whole situation, you've done this before. Quinton hesitated, then decided the truth was going to come out anyway. I was FBI, Child Abduction Unit. Retired 3 years ago. Thornton's expression changed completely. FBI? Why the hell are you working mall security? Long story, but I still care about finding missing kids. Agent Hayes. Just Quinton. I'm not an agent anymore. Thornton studied him for a moment. The suspect we arrested tonight. His name is Derek Purcell. We ran his ID. He's got priors in South Carolina. Attempted abduction, served 3 years, got out on parole 8 months ago. We've been looking for him in connection with another missing child case in Columbia. Quinton felt his blood run cold. Another case? 6-year-old boy disappeared from his backyard 2 weeks ago. We haven't found him yet. Thornton paused. Would you be willing to talk to our detectives? Unofficially? Your experience might help. Quinton thought about Rebecca, about all the children they'd saved together, about the ones they hadn't been able to save. Yeah, I'll help however I can. The next morning, Quinton found himself sitting across from Detective Laura Martinez in an interview room at Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department. Between them was a file folder with photos and reports about the missing 6-year-old boy, Christopher Reeves. Derek Purcell isn't talking, Martinez said, sliding the photos across the table. But his phone records put him in the area where Christopher disappeared, and we found children's toys in his apartment. We think he's been planning these abductions for months. Quinton studied the photos with practiced eyes, the scene where Christopher vanished, the timeline, the witness statements. It all felt familiar, like slipping on an old jacket that still fit perfectly. He's organized, Quinton said. The fact that he had keys to the mall's employee elevator means he prepared. He didn't just grab Maya on impulse. He surveilled her home, knew which window led to her bedroom, planned an exit strategy. Which means he did the same with Christopher. Exactly. Where does Purcell work? Martinez flipped through the file. Landscaping company. Green Valley Lawn Care. Do they service the neighborhoods where both children lived? Martinez's eyes widened as she made the connection. I'll check. She pulled out her phone and made a call. After a brief conversation, she hung up and looked at Quinton with grim confirmation. Both families used Green Valley Lawn Care. Purcell had access to both properties. That's how he surveilled them. While he was mowing lawns, he was watching the children, learning their routines, identifying entry points. Quinton felt the old familiar anger rising, the rage he always felt toward predators who hurt children. He'll have a secondary location, somewhere he took Christopher before things went wrong. Before he killed him? Martinez's voice was quiet. Maybe, or maybe he's keeping him somewhere. Some of these guys, they develop obsessions with specific children. They want to keep them. Martinez pulled up a map on her laptop. Purcell's apartment has already been searched. Nothing there except those toys. But according to his employee file, he rents a storage unit. That's it, Quinton said immediately. That's where he'd take them. Private, isolated, he has the only key. Martinez was already calling for backup. Within 90 minutes, a warrant was obtained, and a tactical team was assembled. Quinton wasn't supposed to be part of the operation. He was a civilian now, a witness, not an agent. But Martinez pulled strings with her lieutenant, and Quinton found himself in a police vest, riding in the back of a response vehicle toward the storage facility on the outskirts of Charlotte. The storage facility was old and run down, the kind of place with minimal security and absentee management. Purcell's unit was in the back corner, number 247, a 10 by 10 space with a roll-up metal door. The tactical team approached silently, bolt cutters ready for the padlock. The team leader counted down with hand signals. 3, 2, 1. The lock snapped, the door rolled up, and officers flooded in with flashlights and weapons raised. Clear, someone shouted. Then, we've got him. We've got the boy. Quinton's heart surged. He pushed forward with Martinez, entering the storage unit. It was set up like a makeshift room, mattress, camping lantern, boxes of food. And there, huddled in the corner under a blanket, was a small boy with tear-stained cheeks and terrified eyes. Christopher Reeves. Alive. A paramedic rushed in to check on the boy while officers began documenting the scene. Martinez turned to Quinton with tears in her eyes. You found him. If you hadn't been at that mall last night, if you hadn't stopped Purcell with Maya, we never would have made these connections. Quinton watched as Christopher was carefully lifted and carried out to the waiting ambulance. The boy was dehydrated and traumatized, but alive. He would recover. He would go home. It's not about me, Quinton said quietly. It's about them. It's always been about the kids. The case became national news within days. Security guard with secret FBI past saves 2 children, read the headlines. Quinton's photo was everywhere, his story told and retold on every news channel. He hated the attention. Fame had never been why he did this work. But the attention did bring something unexpected, validation and closure. His daughter Jasmine called him, crying, "Dad, I'm so proud of you. All these years, I knew you were hurting, but you never stopped trying to help people." His ex-wife reached out through a mutual friend, sending a simple message. Rebecca would be proud. That one broke him. He sat alone in his apartment that night and cried for the first time since Rebecca's funeral. But the biggest surprise came from the FBI. 2 weeks after the case broke, Quinton received a call from Assistant Director Catherine Wade, who now ran the Criminal Investigative Division. "Quinton, we need to talk about bringing you back." "I'm retired," he said automatically. "Not as a field agent, as a consultant, specifically for the child abduction rapid deployment teams. Your experience, your instincts, we've got dozens of active cases that could benefit from your insight." Quinton thought about it. He was 54, past the age for field work. But consulting? Teaching younger agents what he'd learned over nearly 2 decades? Helping solve cases without the physical demands and dangers of fieldwork? "Part-time," he said finally. "I'm not giving up my security job completely." "Why not?" "Quinton, you could be making 6 figures again. Because Riverside Mall is where I need to be sometimes. You'd be surprised how many bad situations happen in places like that. Kids getting lost, suspicious adults, potential trafficking. Someone needs to be paying attention." Wade was quiet for a moment, then laughed softly. "All right. Part-time consultant, flexible schedule. But Quinton, welcome back." 6 months later, Quinton had settled into his new hybrid life. 3 days a week, he worked from a secure home office, reviewing case files and providing analysis to FBI teams across the country. 2 days a week, he worked his night shift at Riverside Mall, walking the floors, watching the cameras, being present. He'd solved 2 more potential abduction situations at the mall, both times recognizing predatory behavior that others had missed. He'd also consulted on 11 FBI cases, providing insights that helped close 9 of them successfully. But the case he was most proud of was one he worked personally, combining his security work with his FBI resources. He'd noticed a pattern over several weeks. A woman who came to the mall every Thursday evening, always with a different child, always buying the child new clothes and toys. The children seemed uneasy, never quite comfortable with her. Something felt off. Quinton had documented everything, taken notes, run facial recognition through FBI databases, with official permission, of course. Turned out the woman was part of a foster care scam, taking in children for the state stipend and then neglecting them. The shopping trips were just for show, to maintain appearances. His documentation helped build the case that got her arrested and 7 children removed from her care and placed in better situations. Rebecca would have been proud of that one. On the anniversary of Rebecca's death, Quinton visited her grave in Virginia. He stood there in silence for a long time, then finally spoke. "I'm doing okay, Becca. The work continues. I found 2 kids this year. Really found them, brought them home safe. And I'm helping others find more. I know I can't bring you back. I know that night was my fault for being impatient. But I'm trying to honor your memory by doing what we always did best together, protecting kids who can't protect themselves." A breeze rustled the leaves of the oak tree nearby, and Quinton chose to believe it was her way of saying she heard him. As he drove back to Charlotte that evening, his phone rang. It was Detective Martinez. "Quinton, we've got a situation. Mall security at Eastridge just called about a suspicious man with a child. Their guard doesn't know what to do." Quinton was already turning his car around. "Tell them I'm 15 minutes away. And tell them not to approach. Just keep eyes on the suspect." "You don't have to do this, you know. We've got patrol units responding." "I know, but this is what I do." Because Quinton Hayes had learned something in the 3 years since he'd walked away from the FBI. Retirement wasn't about age or titles or credentials. It was about choice. And he chose, every single day, to keep fighting for children who couldn't fight for themselves. He wasn't just a security guard. He wasn't just a former FBI agent. He was Quinton Hayes. And every child who went home safely was a victory against the darkness. That was enough. That had always been enough.